The Christian in Complete Armor by William Gurnall. Ephesians chapter 6, verse 18. Chapter 38. A reproach to those that unnecessarily throw themselves to live in such families where the worship of God is not set up. Dost thou know whither thou goest? Thou art running with Jonah from the presence of the Lord, and mayest expect a storm to be sent after thee. Haply thou art a servant who once lived in a godly family, where thou hast many sweet privileges and spiritual advantages, a table spread every day for thy soul as often as thy body, whereby enjoying a kind of heaven upon earth. But for a little ease in thy work, or gain in thy wages, thou hast made this unhappy change, to put thyself under the roof of those who will sooner teach thee to curse than to pray, and where, by the orders kept in the family, thou canst not know a Lord's day from a weekday, or whether there be such a thing as religious worship due to thy Maker or no. Alas, poor creature, what, wert thou in so green a pasture, and now wandering upon the barren heath, where nothing is to be got for thy precious soul, where, as on the mountain of Gilboa, none of those heavenly dews fall, with which thy soul was wont to be watered. Truly, thou art gone out of God's blessing into the warm sun. Had God indeed cast thee by a necessary providence on such a place, thou mightest then have hope to keep thy spiritual state, though wanting thy former repast, but being thy own choice, it is to be feared thou wilt soon languish. Leanness is likely to shrivel up thy soul, while thou hast thy fat morsels in thy mouth. Thy spirit will grow poor, though thy purse may grow heavy. We shall have thee ere long complaining, as Naomi, that thou wentest out full, but camest home empty. How darest thou choose to dwell where God himself does not visit with his gracious presence? He inhabits the praises of his people, and takes his abode in the house of prayer. And if the Holy Spirit dwells not, walks and breathes not, in the house, it must needs be haunted with the evil one. Make thy stay there as short as possible. Leave the dead to dwell with the dead. Thy safety will be to get among better company. Is the church so barren of godly families that none such are to be found who will open their door to let thee in? Go, inquire where such live, and offer to do the meanest office in that house, where thou mayest enjoy thy former privileges for thy soul. The very beasts groan to serve the wicked, whereas holy angels themselves disdain not to minister unto the saints. But haply thou wilt say, it is not thy choice but necessity. Thou art by thy parents but apprentice to a master that is wicked, or thou livest under thy own parents' shadow, and thou canst not help it, though they be profane, or with a husband whom thou didst hope would prove a kind help to thy soul, but thou findest it otherwise. What would ye have us to do in this case? First, mourn under it as thy great affliction. Thus David did when he lived in Saul's wicked house, whose court for irreligion and profaneness he compares to the barbarous Arabians and profane Ishmaelites, lamenting that he was under the necessity of living with such, whom by his relation he could not well leave, and for their wickedness he could worse bear. Woe is me that I sojourn in Meshach, and dwell in the tents of Cedar. Secondly, be the more in thy secret communion with God. If thou hadst to live with a niggard who pinched thy belly, wouldest thou not, though thou hadst but a penny in thy purse, lay it out for bread rather than starve? Thou hadst needs have a bit the more in a corner, then thou art cut short of thy daily bread in the family. Thy soul cannot live without communion with God. Take that thyself which others will not be so kind to allow thee, and that thou mayest husband all thy ends of time the better, thou shalt thus, by God's blessings, first, keep thy spiritual life and vigor. Secondly, be antidote against the infection of that contaminated air thou inhalest. And, thirdly, have a vent to ease thy encumbered spirit of those griefs, reproaches, and trials thou canst not but meet with from such relations. Gracious Hannah had an adversary in the same family, who provoked her sorely, even to make her fret. But this sent her to God in prayer, and there she eased her soul of her burden. Thirdly, adorn thy pity to God by the faithful performance of thy duty to thy relations, though they be not so good. Art thou a servant, and thy master profane? Be thou submissive and humble, diligent and faithful. Let him see that thou darest not rob him of thy time by sloth, or wrong him in his estate by falseness, though he be a thief to thy soul, by not providing for it, but doest with thy utmost skill and strength endeavor to discharge thy trust to him. We see too often that the unfaithfulness and negligency of some professing servants set their carnal masters further off from the worship of God than before, yea, make them loathe the duties of religion, which otherwise they might have been won unto, till at last they come to think all profession in the duties of piety towards God an hypocritical cloak to cover some unfaithfulness to men, and to say to their servants, when they beg leave to go to wait on God and his ordinances, as Pharaoh of the Israelites, ye are idle, therefore say ye, let us go and do sacrifice to the Lord. Exodus 5:17. Thus the name of God and his doctrine are blasphemed through the ill behavior of professing servants. 1 Timothy 6:1. Again, art thou a wife, and thy husband carnal, who lives without any care of his own soul, or those under his roof? Pray the more for him, because he prays not with thee. Pray thou for thy family in thy closet, though he neglects it in the house. But with this be sure to commend thy piety to thy husband's conscience, and make it as legible as possible to his eye, by thy meekness of wisdom in thy carriage to him and thy family. A fair print invites to read the book, religion fairly printed, in thy meek and dutiful behavior to him, and discretion in all thy affairs may in time win him to the consideration of the excellency of religion. He is an unwise augur that scares the fish he desires to take, and she is an unwise Christian that by her peevish and undutiful carriage offends her husband, whose conversation she desires and prays for. End of chapter 38.